tunggu yang lain ya. Ini saya jelaskan dulu. Yang lain nanti kalau oke, 18. Mungkin kameranya dibuka dulu nggak apa-apa. Kameranya dibuka. Ya, kameranya dibuka. 18 orang.
Ya Pak.
Jadi gini, hari ini kuliah hukum internasional itu saya mengundang Pak Basil Fernando. Pak Basil Fernando ini dia adalah seorang pengacara, dia adalah seorang aktivis HAM dan aktivis internasional. Dia ini dari Komisi HAM Asia atau ASEAN Human Rights Commission di Hong Kong. Beliau dari Sri Lanka. Ya, beliau ini dari Sri Lanka sudah punya pengalaman puluhan tahun sejak tahun 94. Beliau ini punya banyak pengalaman di negara-negara Asia. Nanti kita bisa belajar banyak dari Pak Basil bagaimana situasi situasi hukum di negara-negara yang beliau pernah kerja gitu ya, di Sri Lanka, di India, kemudian di Kamboja, termasuk di Indonesia. Pak Basil ini dulu pernah beberapa kali datang ke Indonesia. Nah, tadi saya mengirimkan tulisan itu ya, paper itu tentang SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. Itu ada tujuan pembangunan berkelanjutan. Tadi dibaca ya?
Iya Pak.
Nah, nanti teman-teman, ya saya kasih tugas adalah tolong nanti buat pertanyaan yang bagus, yang kritis ya. Kalau mau pakai bahasa Inggris boleh, mau bertanya pakai bahasa Indonesia boleh. Nanti saya akan saring pertanyaan-pertanyaannya. Tapi kalau mau menyampaikan langsung lebih bagus, karena ini bagian dari tugas saya. Biasa dalam kuliah kadang-kadang saya suka mengundang narasumber-narasumber dari luar untuk memberikan ilmu tambahan ke kalian. Kalau belajar buku aja kan bisa baca sendiri, tapi kalau belajar pengalaman dari negara lain kan lebih menarik gitu maksud saya. Itu ya, nanti tolong disimak kuliahnya Pak Basil. Dia punya pengalaman panjang bekerja di negara-negara Asia. Kemudian dia sekarang punya kantor ASEAN Human Rights Commission atau Komisi HAM di Asia. Oke, Namal, maybe we can take a picture first, no? Maybe we can take picture. Hello, Nama?
I've been done.
Oh, already, okay. Okay, so Mr. Basil, we can start now. This is students of University of Bung Karno in Jakarta. They are in the 3rd grade of the law school or law faculty. Now they are studying international law. And I already sent them the handbook, the paper that discuss about SDGs Sustainable Development Goals number 16. And I hope that they already read, and also we hope that they can critique or give input to the paper. So I told them that you have long experiences working on the human rights field and also dealing with international mechanism. So they are interested to learn your experiences in some other countries in Asia, like Sri Lanka, India, Cambodia, Hong Kong, China maybe, and also how ASEAN Human Rights Commission dealing with this kind of issue, because our concern is that different country has different legal system. How ASEAN countries should develop solidarity among the ASEAN countries to deal with the human rights and also to increase the quality of law enforcement in Indonesia, especially. So I will give the time and the occasion to Mr. Basil Fernando. Then maybe I will translate your lecture in maybe every 1 or 2 minutes I will translate to bahasa. Okay, please, Mr. Basil Fernando.
Okay, I'm very happy to be talking to you. Since you all have law students, I'm also a lawyer, and I've been also involved in the international law for many years.
Saya senang berdiskusi dengan Anda. Saya juga seorang mahasiswa hukum dulunya dan sekarang lawyer dan sudah cukup panjang
Gitu.
Ya, please, Mr. Basil.
Yeah, so because we don't have much time, we get into the subject. So the issue that we will you will want to know, I suppose, is how do you use the international law in order to protect the people of your own country?
Jadi karena kita tidak punya waktu banyak, sekarang kita langsung aja ke topiknya bagaimana menggunakan hukum internasional untuk melindungi orang-orang khususnya di negara Anda.
When you are using the international law to help the people of your country, then the problem is that you cannot do it only by international law. That law, the basic aspects of the international law need to be implanted or domesticated into your own country.
Jadi ketika Anda menggunakan hukum internasional, tidak bisa hanya hukum internasional saja. Anda perlu mengadopsi hukum internasional itu ke dalam domestik atau hukum domestik.
Now, let us take one example. Under the international law, arresting a person or detaining a person has to be done according to certain rules and norms. Chris? Chris?
Jadi, sorry. Suara saya kedengaran,
Pak.
Oke, kita ambil contoh misalnya satu contoh ketika terjadi penangkapan dan penahanan. Ya, please continue, Mr. Basil.
So the first rule under the international law regarding arrestees, that as soon as a person is arrested, in the shortest possible time, he or she should be brought before a court, a judge.
Jadi di bawah hukum internasional itu ketika seseorang ditangkap atau ditahan, maka secepatnya dia harus dibawa ke pengadilan atau ke muka persidangan.
Now, after he is brought to court, according to his offense, the court may allow a detention of the person in a jail or remand for a certain period depending on the offense.
Jadi setelah dia dibawa ke persidangan atau selesai persidangan, pengadilan akan memutuskan apakah dia bisa ditahan di satu lokasi atau ditahan di satu tempat gitu.
So the principle is police custody should be changed into judicial custody as soon as possible.
Jadi
Tutupnya.
prinsipnya penahanan di kepolisian di bawah putusan pengadilan.
Now, what is the difference between the police custody and the judicial custody? Under the international law,
Apa perbedaan penahanan penahanan polisi dan penahanan di pengadilan di bawah hukum internasional? Yes, please.
under the international law, the judicial custody means the judge take over the protection of that person, suspect or accused.
Jadi di bawah hukum internasional, penahanan di bawah pengadilan itu sama dengan melindungi juga suspek atau tersangka.
So the judge is responsible.
Terdakwa yang disidangkan.
So the judge is responsible for what happened to him after that. So the judge,
Hakim bertanggung jawab apa yang terjadi kepada si terdakwa tersebut setelah itu.
so which means that he will be protected from the time he comes to before the judge. He will be protected from torture or using pressure or any other way of dealing badly, because the judge is supposed to prevent that.
Jadi hakim akan melindungi si terdakwa atau terpidana itu dari tindakan-tindakan yang mungkin akan merugikan si terdakwa tersebut.
Now the law in your country and the international law in this regard are different.
Jadi hukum di negara Anda dengan hukum internasional itu beda.
Now, in your according to your country's law, the police can keep the person for, I think, 20 days, and then he can get even more days, altogether about 60 days, and then by the Attorney General for another time, altogether about 90 days, they could be kept without being produced before a judge.
Jadi di negara Anda itu polisi ya bisa menahan seseorang 20 hari ketika ditetapkan sebagai tersangka. Totalnya bisa 60 hari. Di kejaksaan juga kurang lebih 60 hari. Itu dilakukan tanpa putusan pengadilan terlebih dahulu.
Now I gave that an example for you, show that the international law, unless it is implemented in your country, those rights don't become available to the Indonesian people.
Saya kasih contoh hukum internasional yang hak-haknya itu nggak ada di Indonesia ya. Jadi tidak secara spesifik ada dilindungi gitu.
Now there are historical reasons as to why this principle, international law principles regarding arrest and detention, have not yet been a part of the Indonesian law. That is due to.
Jadi di situ ada alat.
Go ahead.
Ya, please. Ya, di situ ada alasan sejarah kenapa penangkapan itu tidak sesuai dengan prinsip hukum internasional.
Gitu.
First of all,
Please.
there was the Dutch law, Dutch as a colony. And thereafter, there was the law under the Indonesian military regime.
Lebih ketat luar negeri ya.
So due to these things, the international law position has not yet been incorporated into your law.
Jadi hukum internasional itu belum sepenuhnya diadopsi oleh Indonesia. Kenapa? Karena kita masih menggunakan hukum warisan Belanda, ya. Kemudian hukum yang dibuat pada masa rezim militer Soeharto pada masa lalu.
So as a result, many people suffer from deprivation of liberty unnecessarily.
Akhirnya banyak orang mengalami perampasan kemerdekaan.
So the idea of having a law and also the international law to prevent the unnecessary restrictions on liberty.
Can you repeat? Sorry, Mr. Basil.
The idea of the international law and also your own local law regarding arrest and detention is to prevent many people suffering unnecessarily by deprivation of their liberty.
Jadi hukum internasional itu ada sebenarnya untuk melindungi dan mencegah orang-orang di negara Anda mengalami perampasan kemerdekaan yang ditimbulkan oleh hukum tadi itu, hukum nasional. Mungkin bisa di silent ya, yang teman-teman itu mikrofonnya. Ya, please Mr. Basil.
Siapa?
Ya, please Mr. Basil.
Yeah. So the first most important issue under the international law, therefore, is whether there is agreement between the international law and Indonesia about the liberty of Indonesians. Should Indonesians have liberty?
Jadi dalam hukum internasional itu ada agreement ya, ada perjanjian tentang bahwa Indonesia itu harus liberty, is it?
Liberty.
Ya, harus bebas, harus merdeka.
If Indonesians have the same right to liberty as anybody else in the world, then unnecessary arrest and unnecessary detention has to be prevented.
Jadi kalau Indonesia itu punya kebebasan yang sama dengan negara-negara yang lebih baik, tentu penangkapan dan penahanan yang tadi disebutkan itu bisa dihindari tanpa putusan pengadilan itu.
So in this regard, in Indonesia are faced with a problem because for about 30 years or more, there was a long period of military rule in the country.
Hal itu disebabkan karena Indonesia mengalami cukup lama periode rezim militer selama 30 tahun ya di bawah Orde Baru.
So during the military regime, there are very many restrictions on liberty.
Ketika rezim militer itu banyak pembatasan kemerdekaan.
At the time, all these things were controlled by the armed forces.
Jadi pada saat itu apapun dikendalikan oleh aparat keamanan.
Later, this was transferred to the police.
Pardon?
Later, these powers of the military were transferred to the military.
Setelah itu kendali dari aparat keamanan ABRI tadi diserahkan atau ditransfer ke polisi. Tolong mikrofonnya ya. Ya.
Siapa?
Ya.
So there's a big gap between the military policing and what we know under civilian policing.
Jadi di situ ada jarak yang cukup lebar ya antara polisi yang bersifat sivilian atau sipil dengan kendali di bawah polisi sendiri.
Civilian policing means that police is not a part of is not done according to the way the military do things.
Jadi civilian policing atau polisi yang berwatak sipil itu sebenarnya dia tidak wajahnya tidak sesuai dengan sistem yang ada di rezim militer tadi.
In the civilian policing, the control of the law, crime, and all these things, and arrest and detention must be done while at the same time respecting the human rights of the individuals.
Jadi kalau civilian policing atau polisi yang berwatak sipil itu ketika dia melakukan penegakan hukum menangkap, tapi di sisi yang lain dia juga harus menghormati hak asasi manusia.
So civilian policeman is not a pure security officer like military.
Jadi civilian policeman atau polisi sipil itu sebenarnya tidak berwatak militeristik.
Civilian policeman is bound to protect the human rights of the persons with whom they are dealing with.
Jadi polisi berwatak sipil itu dia harus menghormati hak asasi manusia ketika dia berurusan dengan seseorang atau kasus.
If you were to respect the human rights, then there should be space for the arrested person or their representative immediately to intervene and if show that if they are innocent, that they should not be arrested.
Jadi polisi yang berwatak sipil itu ketika dia menangani perkara, menangkap seseorang harus secepatnya diinterview, ya, dan menghormati hak-hak si tersangka tersebut atau orang yang ditangkap tersebut.
That is why they are taken before a magistrate so that either the person or his lawyer can tell the judge, well, we have been arrested without a real reason. We have been unjustly arrested. So please release us.
Jadi ketika dihadapkan pada muka persidangan, si lawyer tadi atau pengacara atau prinsipalnya langsung bisa menyampaikan ke hakim bahwa kami mengalami ketidakadilan. Jadi mohon tolong lepaskan kami.
So that is how the domestic, how you apply the domestic law, apply the international law to domestic scene. You need the intervention of judiciary.
Jadi untuk menerapkan hukum internasional ke dalam hukum domestik, ya itu memerlukan intervensi dari peradilan.
Without a very active judiciary and a very active legal profession, it is not possible to protect the liberties of a person.
Jadi tanpa peran aktif pengadilan atau judiciary dan peran aktif profesi legal, maka akan sulit untuk melindungi kebebasan masyarakat atau kemerdekaan masyarakat.
So one of the areas to improve the implementation of international law in your country is to try to understand why it has not developed as it should so far, and in the future to find ways to work as lawyers, as civil society people, as citizens, in order to improve the laws relating to arrest and detention in your country.
Jadi satu area yang perlu dipahami untuk meningkatkan hukum internasional ketika nanti menjadi lawyer atau aktivis masyarakat sipil. In the last word, what is the last word, Mr. Basir?
To improve the your country implementation.
Jadi untuk meningkatkan pelaksanaan hukum internasional di negara Anda.
So what the international law does is to show this is how it should be done in any country.
Jadi hukum internasional itu ingin menunjukkan bahwa hal ini harus dilakukan di negara Anda.
They are giving only the minimum. That's not the maximum. They are giving some minimum standards, saying that at least this much of protection should be there for every individual.
Jadi ini memberikan standar minimum bahwa setiap orang itu harus mendapatkan protection atau perlindungan.
Now, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, since you are studying international law, you would know about that. International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. In Article 2 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which is called the ICCPR, Article 2 is very important.
Jadi karena Anda ini mahasiswa hukum, maka Anda harus tahu tentang kovenan atau perjanjian internasional tentang hak sipil dan politik, khususnya pasal 2, itu sangat penting.
As law students, you should take a lot of interest in trying to understand the Article 2 of the ICCPR.
Sebagai mahasiswa hukum, Anda harus banyak belajar dan tertarik dengan pasal 2 dari kovenan perjanjian internasional tentang hak sipil dan politik tadi.
What does Article 2 say? It says that anyone whose rights have been violated should have a right to effective remedy.
Jadi pasal 2 ini mengatakan semua orang yang haknya dilanggar, maka dia atau orang tersebut berhak atas pemulihan hak.
Suppose, now I mentioned earlier the violation of right of arrest and detention. But there are other rights of other rights that can be violated. There's a right to fair trial. There is a right against torture and ill treatment. There is a right to freedom of expression and freedom of association. And there is a right to elect a government of your choice. Like that, there are number of civil and political rights. When you read the covenant, you can know what those rights are.
Jadi dalam kovenan hak sipil dan politik tadi, ketika terjadi pelanggaran hak, ya hak asasi manusia karena penahanan, penangkapan, itu ada beberapa hak yang jelas-jelas dilanggar, yaitu apa? Hak atas peradilan yang fair, hak untuk tidak disiksa, hak untuk kebebasan berekspresi, kebebasan berkumpul, hak untuk berpartisipasi dalam pemilihan pemimpin yang demokratis dan lain sebagainya.
There are also rights regarding the right of movement. You can move from one place to the other without restrictions. You have a right to conscience, your own conscience, what you believe, your right to believe what you believe, right to worship the way you worship. And then there is also the right to virtually choose, make a choice of whatever profession you want, whatever job, whatever area, provided you get yourself qualified, you have a right for. Now these are some of the rights under the Civil and Political Rights Covenant.
Jadi di bawah perjanjian internasional tentang hak sipil dan politik tadi, itu mengatur tentang right to movement atau hak untuk berpindah tempat, hak untuk meyakini keyakinan politik, meyakini agama, kepercayaan, beribadah, dan juga untuk kebebasan memilih profesi yang Anda inginkan.
Now, suppose one of those rights, all those list of rights I mentioned, is violated. Say somebody is not allowed to go to the mosque, or some Christian is not allowed to go to the church or worship, or some persons don't allow you to participate in a legitimate demonstration. Somebody doesn't allow you to write to a newspaper freely, or to do in the internet or the IT to publish your legitimate views. I'm not talking about just misuse in the internet, but good use of internet. You give your opinions, your ideas through the internet. Now suppose somebody is stopped, then he should have an effective remedy. That is, he should be able to go to court and complain to the court, my rights have been violated. Then court is under obligation to correct it.
Jadi asumsikan salah satu hak yang saya sebutkan tadi dilanggar. Misalkan seseorang dilarang atau dibatasi hak untuk beribadah, misalkan yang Islam ke masjid atau yang Kristen ke gereja atau yang Buddha ke wihara, atau Anda tidak boleh ikut demonstrasi yang sah, ya, yang legitimate, atau tidak boleh menulis di koran, atau tidak boleh mengekspresikan pendapat Anda yang baik, ya, yang baik di internet. Hak-hak itu kalau dilarang, maka seharusnya Anda bisa mendapatkan pemulihan hak yang itu bisa diperjuangkan di pengadilan. Itu pengalaman di negara lain.
So your courts are the lifeblood of your rights.
Jadi pengadilan itu harusnya menjadi denyut nadi dari hak Anda.
Without a good court system, you cannot get your rights realized.
Jadi tanpa sistem pengadilan yang bagus, Anda tidak akan mendapatkan hak-hak Anda yang ideal.
So in order to implement international law in your country, you must have an improvement of your court system. If the court system improves, it can improve the policing system.
Jadi untuk melaksanakan hukum internasional di negara Anda, maka Anda harus memastikan sistem peradilan itu baik. Kalau sistem peradilan itu baik, maka sistem kepolisian itu juga akan baik. Dan
So
harus ditingkatkan.
This means you people have, as young law students, for you, there is work for another 20-25 years in order to see that your system will improve to the international law standards.
Jadi tolong suara apa itu ya? Jadi sebagai mahasiswa hukum dan masih muda, maka Anda akan punya kesempatan untuk bekerja sampai 20 tahun ke depan. Dan setelah itu Anda bisa melihat apakah sistem di negara saya ini sudah membaik atau tidak.
But if it is to happen, if you are going to make a contribution for that in your generation, your young lawyers and others, then you should understand this problem.
Jadi hal ini akan terjadi ya, perbaikan sistem ini akan terjadi kalau Anda ini sebagai mahasiswa membuat kontribusi, melakukan sesuatu untuk sistem Anda supaya lebih baik.
Now, what does the UN mechanisms do in order to help you to protect your rights?
Jadi apa yang dilakukan oleh sistem PBB ya, yang bisa dilakukan oleh sistem PBB untuk memastikan perlindungan atas hak-hak Anda?
UN mechanisms have opened up many avenues for people to complain to the UN if some of your rights are being violated.
Jadi sistem PBB atau Perserikatan Bangsa-Bangsa itu menyediakan mekanisme untuk mengadu jika Anda ini terlanggar hak asasinya.
In the UN system, there is a group of people called rapporteurs or reporters.
Di sistem PBB itu ada sekumpulan petugas atau orang yang disebut sebagai pelapor khusus.
Now these rapporteurs are people who will receive complaints from the citizens of any country, including Indonesia, on different topics. Different topics have different rapporteurs.
Jadi si pelapor khusus ya yang di Perserikatan Bangsa-Bangsa tadi akan menerima pengaduan dari banyak negara, termasuk Indonesia, termasuk pengaduan dari Anda, tentang banyak latar belakang perkara.
There is a rapporteur against the torture and ill treatment.
Jadi ada pelapor khusus yang menangani tentang penyiksaan dan perbuatan tidak manusiawi.
There is a committee to look into torture and ill treatment. It is called Committee Against Torture.
Jadi ada sebuah komite atau panitia ya di PBB itu yang khusus menangani kasus-kasus penyiksaan atau disebut dengan Komite Anti Penyiksaan.
There is a UN mechanism regarding extrajudicial killings and also disappearances. And that is called the Working Committee Against Disappearances.
Jadi di PBB juga ada komite yang menangani pembunuhan ya di luar prosedur hukum, itu pembunuhan di luar pembunuhan yang bukan hukuman mati, dan juga kelompok kerja atau working group yang menangani penghilangan orang secara paksa.
Regarding right of conscience, right to practice your religion, right against discrimination, there are various branches in the UN to receive complaints and to help realize that right.
Jadi di PBB itu selain itu ada juga yang menangani khusus keyakinan politik, kepercayaan, anti diskriminasi dan cabang-cabang yang lain yang siap menangani pengaduan-pengaduan yang disampaikan di PBB.
There are two special committees. That is Committee Against the Rights of the Child, Committee for the Rights of the Child, and the Committee CEDAW, that is the Violence Against Women. Now,
Jadi di PBB, ya, please.
These two committees particularly are important because they are particularly to protect the rights of women and rights of children.
Jadi di PBB itu ada komite yang sifatnya khusus, yaitu komite khusus untuk perlindungan hak anak dan komite khusus yang menangani kekerasan terhadap perempuan. Dua komite ini penting karena melindungi kelompok rentan, yaitu anak dan perempuan.
And there is a rapporteur for independence of judiciary.
Ada juga pelapor khusus untuk peradilan yang independen.
Now, if there are problems of independence in your country regarding the judiciary, you can write a petition or report to the UN rapporteur for the protection of the judiciary.
Jika ada masalah dalam sistem peradilan Anda, maka Anda itu juga bisa menuliskan pengaduan atau laporan kepada pelapor khusus yang mengawal peradilan independen di PBB.
Then you have the UN Human Rights Council.
Anda juga punya Dewan HAM di PBB.
The UN Human Rights Council, there are member states who meet several times a year and listen to various submissions from the governments as well as from the people.
Jadi Dewan HAM PBB ini rutin bertemu dengan anggotanya negara-negara, dia menerima pengaduan masukan dari banyak negara.
They can make various recommendations.
Dewan HAM PBB juga bisa membuat banyak rekomendasi.
And then there is for those who have signed what is called the optional protocol for ICCPR. There's a thing called Human Rights Committee.
Jadi bagi negara yang sudah mengadopsi protokol opsional atau perjanjian opsional dari perjanjian hak sipil dan politik tadi, dia bisa mengakses ke komite khusus.
As far as I know, Indonesia is not a party to that.
Setahu saya Indonesia belum menjadi pihak dari protokol tambahan perjanjian tentang hak sipil dan politik tadi.
So in the future, this is one area Indonesian people demand from the government that they should ratify the optional protocol to the ICCPR.
Jadi di masa depan Anda ini ya sebagai mahasiswa hukum internasional, Anda bisa memperjuangkan kepada pemerintah agar mengadopsi atau meratifikasi perjanjian tambahan atau protokol tambahan dari perjanjian internasional untuk hak sipil dan politik.
So to sum up, first of all, there are rights recognized by the UN Convention.
Jadi untuk men-sum up atau meresume, maka itu what is the last word? Sorry.
UN conventions recognize rights, international law rights.
Oh, jadi UN Convention atau perjanjian-perjanjian internasional di bawah PBB itu mengakui hak-hak asasi manusia atau recognize human rights ya.
Second stage is that the governments must make local laws, domestic laws to protect human rights.
Nah, tahap kedua memastikan bahwa pemerintah nasional atau pemerintah lokal itu membuat peraturan-peraturan atau mengadopsi peraturan yang melindungi hak-hak asasi manusia.
Government or the state should not only make laws but create institutions to protect human rights, like good policing system, good prosecutor system, good court system,
Jadi
as well as
pemerintah
national institutions like the National Human Rights Commission.
Jadi pemerintah nasional itu tidak hanya membuat undang-undang, tapi juga harus memastikan institusi itu baik, polisi yang berwatak sipil, kemudian peradilan yang fair, dan juga Komnas HAM atau National Human Rights Institution itu yang bekerja dengan baik.
Now, over that, there is the Article 2 of the ICCPR.
Jadi hal-hal yang saya sampaikan tadi atau tentang semua itu sebenarnya yang tercermin dalam pasal 2 dari Kovenan Perjanjian Internasional tentang Hak Sipil dan Politik.
By which people who have their rights violated can seek an effective, not just a remedy, effective remedy. That is a remedy that will solve the problem.
Sorry, can you repeat, Mr. Basil?
Over what he has said earlier, there is also the Article 2, which provides that if your right is violated, you should have a remedy, effective remedy. Effective remedy means remedy that works.
Ya, jadi ketika hak-hak Anda yang diatur dalam pasal 2 Perjanjian Internasional tentang Hak Sipil dan Politik tadi dilanggar ya, maka Anda berhak atas remedi atau pemulihan dari hak yang dilanggar tadi.
All that, there is the UN system as I described it.
Sorry.
All that is the UN system, UN mechanisms, which we earlier described.
Oh, jadi semua hal itu sebenarnya terkait dengan sistem PBB yang tadi saya sudah jelaskan sebelumnya.
So that's a broad overview. So if you have some questions, I think we could discuss.
Jadi itu penjelasan saya dan silahkan saya menunggu kalau ada pertanyaan atau klarifikasi Anda.
Saya mau tanya, Pak.
Silahkan.
Saya mau tanya, Pak.
Pakai Inggris boleh?
Pak. Pakai bahasa Indonesia boleh, Pak?
Boleh.
Oke.
Pelan-pelan ya.
Siapa?
Oke, please.
Apakah pelanggaran HAM masa lalu dapat menghambat investasi dari luar negeri, Pak? Mohon dijelaskan, Pak.
Oke, ada lagi? Yang lain? Satu lagi?
Saya, Pak. Saya mau bertanya,
Ya.
Pak.
Ya, silahkan.
In application of international law to domestic law, why does international law require intervention from the courts?
Because the courts are your country mechanism to implement law. International law cannot come to your country and take your country is a sovereign country. Your country is an independent country. So the protection of your country's rights are within your country. UN does not have the power to come to your country and decide your cases.
Oke, Mr. Basil. Itu suara apa ya?
Your government.
Oke, I will translate first. Itu suara apa ya, teman-teman? Jadi hukum internasional ya, saya substansinya aja ya, intinya hukum internasional itu ya nggak bisa tiba-tiba melakukan sesuatu di negara Anda. Maka itu harus melalui jalur peradilan tadi atau putusan peradilan atau mekanisme judiciary tadi. Ya, please, Mr. Basil.
The UN is not a super state.
Jadi PBB itu bukan apa ya, bukan sesuatu yang super atau negara super.
It is not even a state.
Bahkan bukan negara PBB itu.
It is merely a gathering of other states, many states, on the basis of agreements.
Jadi hanya merupakan kumpulan negara dan basisnya itu hanya kesepakatan.
What happens within the territory of your country is something where the authority of your territory, which is the government, should resolve.
Jadi yang terjadi di negara Anda misalkan dalam teritori pemerintah Anda yaitu sebenarnya pemerintah yang harus menyelesaikan.
Government is part of the courts are part of the state mechanism.
Jadi negara itu sebenarnya bagian dari court atau pengadilan dan sistem negara. Another question, Mr. Basil. This is one question in the chat. Many countries have ratified ICCPR and many other international instruments about human rights, but not all of the issues in those instruments have been implemented. Do the UN have certain mechanism to manage the countries that have not adopted the UN regulation to national regulation? Is from Mahesa Yuda Kumbara, one of the students.
So we go back to the same question. Implementation of human rights is the task of your country, state, your country. And that is why the Article 2 is there. We talk about the Article 2. Obligation on the Article 2 to every country is that they should provide ways to protect the human rights in their country. Now, what the government, what the UN does is to supervise and monitor whether it is happening. If not, they will make recommendations of how to improve. So UN does not have a right to come to your country and decide your cases, except in very rare cases, like when it comes to the International Criminal Court. But that is for things like, large scale, like your military 1964-65 massacres. Now that kind of thing, if there's a way to go about that, in those things, the UN have certain rights to have international courts. Otherwise,
please. Jadi pelaksanaan hak asasi manusia itu sebenarnya tugas dari pemerintah ya. Itu kenapa tadi pasal 2 dari Kovenan Hak Sipil dan Politik atau ICCPR itu negara harus menyediakan atau memastikan perlindungan. Jadi yang namanya Perserikatan Bangsa-Bangsa itu hanya melakukan pemantauan atau memastikan saja. Kalau itu tidak berjalan maka PBB bisa membuat rekomendasi agar pemerintah memperbaiki, kecuali kasus-kasus yang sudah masuk atau masuk kategori kejahatan internasional yang ditangani oleh pengadilan pidana internasional. Misalkan di negara Anda itu ada kasus 65 atau kasus pelanggaran HAM yang terjadi di masa lalu, itu PBB melalui pengadilan pidana internasional bisa melakukan kajian atau intervensi.
Your country is a sovereign country, like every other country.
Jadi negara mengalami penderitaan seperti negara-negara lain, suffering, right?
Sovereign. Yeah.
Sovereign. Jadi country sovereign another country, is it?
Sovereign.
Jadi sovereign, kedaulatan. Jadi negara
independent.
Oke. Negara independen atau merdeka, berdaulat. Yes, please.
So nobody has a right to violate the territory of your country and enter into your country and to do things in your country except with your permission, with your country's permission.
Jadi tidak ada satupun negara ataupun siapapun yang bisa mengintervensi negara Anda tanpa izin atau permisi dari Anda atau pemerintah Anda. One more question, Mr. Basil. This is from one of the students. He asked about past human rights abuses. Whether past human rights abuses which occurred in Indonesia, it will become a problem for international investment. Is it?
First of all, you have to establish to the time your massacre happened, International Criminal Court did not exist. International Criminal Court came into existence only later in the 80s or that time, 90s. So what happened in 1964 cannot come to the International Criminal Court. But if the people demand and people collect information and show, the UN can act on other basis for an international tribunal. But that also has to be done with the agreement of your government.
Oke, jadi Pengadilan Pidana Internasional atau ICC ya, International Criminal Court itu hadir kan tahun 98. Jadi apa yang terjadi tahun 1965 itu tentu tidak bisa dibawa ke pidana internasional atau pelanggaran HAM masa lalu ya, itu tidak bisa dibawa ke pidana internasional. Tapi PBB bisa membuat resolusi atau special tribunal atau pengadilan khusus yang sifatnya itu sementara. How about the investment, Mr. Bas?
How about?
The question is related to economic problem. Whether past human rights abuses will be a problem of investment.
Yeah,
investment, the economic problem.
Different governments can make sanctions if they want, and they can say, well, unless you do, some justice to these people who lost in the massacre, we impose sanctions. We will not do business with you, or we will not do particular type of business with you. That depends on each country. That's not the UN. That's each country.
Jadi ini sebenarnya pertanyaannya, jawabannya tergantung dari masing-masing negara ya. Ada juga negara yang mensyaratkan atau memberikan sanksi kalau Anda tidak menyelesaikan atau memenuhi hak-hak korban pelanggaran HAM masa lalu, maka kami tidak akan melakukan investasi atau kami tidak akan melakukan kerjasama ekonomi. Jadi ini sifatnya tergantung negara-negara masing-masing gitu. Other questions? Ada lagi one more question. If there is international agreement that already ratified, then there is an amendment. If there is an international agreement that ratified by the government, then the agreement amended by the committee. Then what happened with the national law that already bound or adopt the international agreements? Whether the national law will also change or it not will change the national law. Do you get the point?
What is the if there is an international agreement?
The point is that yeah. There is international agreement, and the committee make a change or amend the international agreement, but the government already ratified before the amendment of the international agreement. Is it possible?
The international agreement means those conventions.
Yes.
So those things are not changed. They may improve further.
Yeah.
You don't change them.
Jadi tidak ada amandemen. Oke. Jadi tidak ada perubahan kecuali perubahan yang lebih baik. Jadi sifatnya itu sebenarnya memperbaiki. Ya, please then.
Do you have any example in your mind?
Apakah ada contoh nggak, Gabriela, pertanyaan Anda ini? Gabriela Valeria. maksud dari pertanyaan itu? Ada contohnya nggak? Maybe it's about reservation, Mr. Basil.
Reservation, that's different.
Yeah.
Reservations are not done by committee. Reservations are done by the government.
Oke, jadi dalam perjanjian internasional itu ada mekanisme yang disebut reservasi atau mungkin penafsiran dari negara-negara peserta. Nah, tapi itu tidak akan merubah substansi. Itu hanya berlaku untuk negara yang mengajukan reservasi itu.
So when an agreement is signed, if there's a one particular section that is against your local customs or some local, the tradition, something like that. So
jadi reservasi,
the government can say we will not agree to that part of the agreement, but we agree to the rest.
Oh, jadi reservasi atau penafsiran dari negara peserta itu bisa dilakukan seandainya dalam perjanjian internasional itu ada poin atau pasal khusus yang tidak sesuai dengan kebiasaan di negara tersebut. Tapi dia bisa melakukan reservasi, tapi dia harus tetap tunduk pada keseluruhan dari isi perjanjian internasional tersebut. Please.
But you cannot make a reservation on very essential points of that convention.
Jadi reservasi itu tidak bisa mempengaruhi atau merubah pasal yang sangat penting dalam perjanjian internasional itu.
For example, there is in the international, the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the principle of non-discrimination. Now a government cannot say, well, we will discriminate against a particular ethnic group or women or like that. That cannot be said because they go against the basic principles.
Okay.
There are certain things which may not be central to the convention. On those things, you can make some reservation.
Jadi dalam contohnya ya, ini dalam perjanjian internasional tentang hak sipil dan politik itu ada prinsip yang sangat mendasar yaitu non-diskriminasi atau tidak boleh diskriminasi. Pemerintah tidak boleh itu menafsirkan kami keberatan dan kami mendiskriminasi etnis tertentu dan lain sebagainya. Itu nggak boleh. Itu harga mati ya, katakanlah seperti itu. Kenapa? Karena itu bertentangan dengan prinsip yang sangat mendasar dari perjanjian internasional tentang hak sipil dan politik yang melarang praktek diskriminasi. Okay, I will ask. This is another question from the chat from Jenton Irwandi. From Aditya Sri Kuncoro. How effective is the role of international organization in imposing punishment on other countries whose government are involved in human rights violation, but which can eliminate evidence at witness of this violation? So how effective, Mr. Basil, punishment
effectiveness
international organization, please?
Effectiveness depend on what the problem is and what the action is. For example, in Cambodia, there was a civil war. First of all, there was Pol Pot, who destroyed over 1 million people in his country. And then there was a civil war for about 10, 12 years. At that point, the UN brought about an agreement and then sent in a huge task force to have a legitimate election. Now, for that purpose, it was an effective intervention. Then there are cases where there had been some people have been tried. Rwanda, cases like that. Some people who violated the rights of people on, crimes against humanity, war crimes have been punished. So, well, to that extent, they are effective. But but these are very rare. The big interventions are very rare.
Okay.
So
Jadi,
effectiveness really depends. Effectiveness of human rights protection depends on the people and the government, your own government.
Jadi,
your people who will demand and work for it.
Jadi intervensi itu sebenarnya tergantung pada masalah, pada kasusnya, pada orang-orangnya, dan pada pemerintah Anda ya. Kita ambil contoh misalkan di Pol Pot, kasus Pol Pot di Kamboja yang membunuh lebih dari 1 juta orang. Di saat yang sama di sana ada perang sipil atau civil war. Kemudian PBB melakukan intervensi pada saat itu, mengirimkan pasukan penjaga perdamaian untuk memastikan terjadi pemilihan yang demokratis. Atau ambil contoh tadi ada kasus di Rwanda ya, ada kejahatan kemanusiaan, ada kejahatan perang. Itu bisa dilakukan intervensi. Tapi kasus ini sangat jarang terjadi gitu. Ya. Ada pertanyaan lagi. One more, Mr. Basit.
Yeah.
Question. This is from Jenton Irwandi. He wrote in the chat. We know that there are many gross violation of human rights in many countries in the world. But there is a reconciliation mechanism to deal with human rights. What is the consideration of the reconciliation mechanism, and how international perspective deal with the human rights victim? So do you get the point?
Yes.
Is this about the reconciliation mechanism in many countries, and
I get the question. Yeah.
Okay.
The question of reconciliation is based on the fact that the past human rights abusers leaves a very deep emotional, psychological wounds in the hearts and minds of the people. When you say you have so many million people died in 1965. As a result of that, those who survive after that, from their families and even the whole nation, there is the shock of those events, sadness, the loss of their families, so many psychological problems associated with past events. So the idea of reconciliation mechanisms, like the South African Truth Commission, is to give a chance to the victims to come out and express their grievances to the public, thereby to get a recognition that something wrong has been done. And the people need that. People need to recognize that they have been wronged. And that's a very important part of reconciliation. Second aspect is that some victims also can be compensated. The victims can be asked to pay compensation for wrongs they have done. At the same time, those who have done really serious wrongs to be punished. All that is within the idea that after big wounds have been created in the society because of violence, you cannot go on, that society cannot go on unless we have some way to go through this whole process psychologically, emotionally, and go through that process and come to terms, okay, it happens in the past, but now we have come to a way to find that it will never happen in the game. That's the purpose of reconciliation. And it is the victim that is given the first place in a reconciliation process.
Jadi saya coba ambil poinnya ya. Jadi prinsip dasar dari rekonsiliasi itu korban harus ditempatkan sebagai subjek yang utama. Rekonsiliasi ini basisnya adalah fakta. Kasus pelanggaran HAM masa lalu itu traumatik, penuh luka, kesedihan. Misalkan kasus pelanggaran HAM masa lalu di Indonesia misalkan dari tahun 65 ya. Akibatnya banyak yang sedih karena kehilangan anggota keluarga, orang yang dicintai dan lain sebagainya. Kemudian ide rekonsiliasi kita ambil contoh di Afrika Selatan. Di sana itu ada mekanisme untuk memberikan kesempatan kepada korban, menyampaikan kepada publik dalam mekanisme rekonsiliasi tadi ya, menyampaikan ke publik bahwa ada sesuatu yang salah yang terjadi di masa lalu. Dan orang-orang yang hadir di situ atau publik harus mengerti dan mengakui bahwa ada sesuatu yang salah yang disampaikan yang menimpa si korban tadi. Kemudian yang kedua, setelah mekanisme rekonsiliasi tadi, korban bisa mendapatkan kompensasi. Namun bagi yang melakukan pelanggaran yang serius ya atau pelaku pelanggaran HAM yang berat itu tidak boleh ikut rekonsiliasi, dia harus dibawa ke mekanisme pengadilan. Karena pelanggaran yang dilakukan cukup berat. Nah, itu prinsip dari rekonsiliasi. Jadi masyarakat tidak bisa melenggang atau tidak bisa maju kalau kasus-kasus pelanggaran HAM yang terjadi itu tidak diselesaikan. This question. All of this question is related with the handbook, actually, Mr. Basil. And this is one more from one of the student. His name is Isaac Rizetvalna Hussona. He asked about the retributive and restorative justice. The two point of thought. What do you? Sorry. Whether the 2 point of the thought, the retributive and restorative justice, is the effective way to resolve human rights cases in Indonesia, and what is the benefit of those mechanism, restorative and distributive justice. Can you explain about this, Mr. Basil? So the student mentioned about retributive and restorative justice, the way to resolve human rights. This is appear in the paper.
Retributive justice is that anybody who has done wrong should be punished. It is regarding the perpetrator of the crime or perpetrator of the wrong, that they have done something very bad, very wrong. Like, for example, they cause a massacre, or they rape women, or they, imprison people unnecessarily, or they made people disappear, or they killed in a large scale, or all these people who did that, and the people who masterminded that should be punished. That is called retributive. Restorative means regarding the victim. Victim must be brought back to the position she was to the extent possible before they suffered the wrong. Now, that's almost impossible, because if your husband was killed, you cannot give him life back. Or if a woman is raped, you cannot, bring that situation back. But then the restorative means, to the extent possible, they should be brought back to where they were. That is, they have a right for psychological counseling. They have a right to be healed. Healing process. They can go through a healing process by which they can come back to a normal life, restore, coming back to the normal life. You don't continue forever in the way that you have fallen. From the fall, you can get up, and you are helped to get up and given help in order to come back to normal life and carry on a normal life. That is the aspect of restorative. Both of those are necessary in any country, including Indonesia.
Jadi prinsipnya retributive justice itu orang yang bersalah harus dihukum. Jadi ada banyak kasus tadi disebutkan ya, ada kasus penghilangan paksa, pembantaian, kemudian pembunuhan ya. Jadi orang yang menjadi pelaku atau pelaku intelektual itu harus dihukum. Itu prinsip dari retributive justice. Jadi penghukuman atau punishment. Jadi kalau untuk restorative justice itu sebenarnya prinsipnya mengembalikan korban kepada situasi sebelum dia menjadi korban. Tapi ini nggak mungkin, karena tadi Pak Basil mengatakan masa ketika suaminya dibunuh dia harus dipertemukan dengan suaminya lagi, kan nggak mungkin. Jadi restorative justice itu memungkinkan untuk melakukan pemulihan trauma atau trauma healing, kemudian ada counseling ya. Jadi korban bisa dikembalikan pada situasi yang normal melalui pemulihan trauma, membuat korban bangkit dari keterpurukan sehingga dia bisa kembali hidup normal. Itu prinsip restorative justice. Dan tadi Pak Basil mengatakan dua prinsip itu penting untuk semua negara termasuk Indonesia. Oke,
baik, terima kasih.
What else? This is about Papua, Mr. Basil. From Warsita Rani Mabilehi ya, bacanya gitu ya. Apakah perang dalam konflik HAM masih berlaku? This is about the armed conflict in Papua. Whether in the armed conflict situation, whether human rights still apply. For example, the Indonesian military in Papua to protect civilian committed human rights violation against rebellion groups. So whether the Indonesian military who protect Papua and war against rebellion groups is violated human rights or committed human rights violation.
Yeah, the details, you have to discuss the details, your country, the details. The principle is that in the situation of an armed conflict, the government has the right to impose certain limitations to the rights. So, to the extent they are necessary, they cannot impose any regulation as they wish. They cannot arrest every person as they wish. And they should be given the right before court in order to protest if it is a wrong arrest. So the basic principle is, yes, within an armed conflict, normal life, cannot carry on. So there are some special powers, but those powers are limited. You cannot arrogate every kind of power in order to under the pretext of control of armed rebellion. So you have to balance two things. On the one hand, the normal life has to be restored. secondly, any limitation should be only to the extent they are necessary. You cannot declare a war on a population.
Jadi dalam situasi perang, pemerintah itu bisa memberlakukan pembatasan ya. Tentu tadi Pak Basil menyampaikan hidup normal itu tidak bisa sepenuhnya dilakukan. Dan dua prinsip utama yang harus diseimbangkan ya adalah dalam situasi perang, internal armed conflict tadi itu, maka pembatasan-pembatasan yang dilakukan itu tidak bisa dilakukan secara menyeluruh, hanya pada aspek-aspek tertentu saja yang diperlukan. Kurang lebih seperti itu. This is also important question, Mr. Basil, from Mahesa Yuda. He is asking about Papua. In the last UN Congress, Vanuatu, one of the country in Pacific, told the UN Congress that Indonesia committed human rights violation in Papua. In the context of sovereignty, is it allowed for country to do intervention to another country regarding this issue, human rights violation in Papua?
Yes, that's the very idea of the UN. UN is like a family, where if one person thinks that the other person is doing something wrong, they have a right to point out, saying that you are doing something wrong according to the international law. Any country has that right. Now, there may be something happening in, let us say, for example, India. At the moment in India, there's a lot of starvation. Very high starvation level exists. So anybody, any Indonesia can criticize India for having starvation deaths, or any other country. So the one country, that is the very idea, you come together. They have come there by agreement to help each other. In the process of helping each other, you also criticize each other when there's wrong. That has nothing to do with sovereignty. Sovereignty is if somebody comes and interferes with your territory. But regarding your right, we are all human beings. Somebody in Africa has a right to speak on my behalf. Suppose I am illegally arrested. Somebody in Africa has a right to talk on my behalf and say, no, that should not be done. They can talk on your behalf. So the right of people to help each other, like in a village. Suppose some people go and fight with another group and harass them, or somebody go and harass a woman. Other people have a right to say, no, don't stop. You have no right to do that. That has nothing to do with sovereignty.
Oke. Jadi Pak Basil mengibaratkan Perserikatan Bangsa-Bangsa ya dalam kasus Vanuatu itu seperti family, seperti keluarga. Jadi kalau ada yang salah atau ada tetangga tadi atau negara yang salah ya diingatkan. Karena apa? Dasarnya adalah hukum internasional. Misalkan tadi Pak Basil mengambil contoh di India itu ada kasus kelaparan yang sangat luar biasa ya. Itu siapapun termasuk Anda orang Indonesia bisa mengkritik India. Jadi negara itu dalam hubungan internasional bisa saling membantu dan juga bisa saling mengkritik. Jadi tidak mutlak itu kedaulatan itu dalam konteks untuk perlindungan individu tadi ya atau warga negara tadi. Misalkan ambil contoh di Afrika tadi Pak Basil mengatakan misalkan di Afrika ada orang yang dilanggar haknya atau ditangkap dan Anda orang Indonesia itu bisa melakukan kritik atau membantu orang tersebut. Jadi nothing to do with the sovereignty. Jadi nggak ada yang bisa dihambat atas nama kedaulatan untuk membantu orang lain gitu. Okay, it's almost 9 p.m. Maybe in Hong Kong now it's almost 10, Mr. Basil. So a lot of.
Anyway, you all are very good group of students. You have a lot of questions. That is very good.
Jadi Pak Basil senang. Ya.
That is the main thing for student life and for intellectual life. Even if you can't find answers, ask questions. Ask questions why your policing system is how it is. Why is it so backward? Even when compared to other countries around. Why are people tortured at police stations? Why are, extrajudicial killings takes place? Why there are other problems relating to the rights of women, the rights of children. Why do these things happen? So keep on questioning. You may not find the solution to your questions immediately, but as you go along, you will find that you can influence others, and thereby you can little by little change things. So I'm very happy with your class because you all ask questions.
Oke, jadi saya sangat senang ya dengan kelas ini, dengan mahasiswa seperti Anda ini sangat bagus, dan itulah mahasiswa. Jadi banyak bertanya, meskipun belum menemukan jawaban tidak apa-apa, karena bertanya itu bagian dari proses. Bertanya misalkan tentang kenapa sistem kepolisian seperti ini, kenapa ada kasus pembunuhan, kenapa ada masalah terkait kekerasan terhadap perempuan, anak, dan lain sebagainya. Enggak apa-apa, itu bertanya meskipun Anda tidak menemukan jawabannya dalam waktu singkat, tapi pertanyaan-pertanyaan itu lambat laun akan dapat membawa atau mempengaruhi komunitas yang lain agar membawa dampak yang lebih baik. Dan saya sangat senang dengan pertanyaan-pertanyaan Anda tadi yang terakhir tadi, dan ya itu kesannya Pak Basil. Still a lot of questions, Mr. Basil, but I summarize some of the question. Do you mind if we take one more?
Sure.
Okay, one more question I will take from Rival Fahrian Susnedi. Throughout 2013, Indonesia foreign policy in the field of human rights was still limited to procedural matters and formality. The policy issued by Indonesian government in the field of human rights does not contribute to the process of promoting and protecting human rights. Why is it happening?
Because your civil society, the people in your country have not yet taken a very active, important, role in posing these questions for protection of human rights within your country, and therefore the government ignores you. So what is necessary is the people to ask, why are we being ignored? And how can we prevent ourselves being ignored? So for that, of course, it will depend on the extent to which you people work in your own country in order to improve your human rights. If your civil society works hard and they post these questions correctly, then the government will open up little by little. Earlier there was a military government and you were able to bring down the military government. That is from there on, it may be a slow progress, but it will depend on the strength of the civil society. It is not only of the government.
Oke, jadi ya ini sebenarnya karena masyarakat di negara Anda ya, atau masyarakat sipil di negara Anda itu belum mengambil peran ya, belum mengambil peran maksimal. Kemudian di sisi yang lain pemerintah abai. Jadi peran apa yang diambil oleh masyarakat seharusnya tadi mempertanyakan tentang kenapa perlindungan dan pemajuan HAM itu tidak berjalan. Kemudian ini semua tergantung dari Anda dan masyarakat sipil di negara Anda, seberapa keras Anda mempertanyakan ini kepada pemerintah. Jika itu dilakukan, maka pemerintah, meskipun dia pemerintah yang militeristik, tentu akan pelan-pelan membuka diri terhadap masalah yang ada. Jadi prinsipnya ini tergantung pada masyarakat sipil atau Anda sebagai bagian dari masyarakat sipil. Oke. Oke, Mr. Basil. It's almost 10 p.m. in Hong Kong, ya. Okay, I think it is enough, ya. We already summarized almost all questions here. Is there any point, students? Do you have to say something before we end the meeting? If you have, please, you can open up your mic. Okay. If there is no, Rival, you want to say something?
Thank you for materi. Terima kasih untuk materi yang telah diberikan, Pak.
Okay, thank you very much for your speech, for your lecture. Nabila, do you want to say something to Mr. Basil? You can say in bahasa.
Makasih Pak untuk bisa ngasih materi kita lebih. Saja Pak, makasih aja.
Thank you very much, Mr. Basil, for your lecture today. And the last, who can speak English? Mahesa, you speak English, huh? Please
yes.
say some. Yeah, the last. You can say something to Mr. Basil.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Basil, for your comprehensive explanation, and we hope that it is not the last meeting that we can have again such this meeting, so we can get your knowledge for our study. Thank you, Mr. Basil.
Thank you. Andalusia, the last. Andalusia, you speak English, right? Anda?
Thank you, Mr. Basil. Maybe we can representative for the victim from Indonesia.
Okay. So thank you very much, Mr. Basil. We have 37 participants from students. They are very interested with your lecture and learn a lot from your experiences. And we believe and we hope that this point of discussion tonight will contribute to their future life, will influence to students to be part of progressive civil society to develop Indonesian judiciary system. So next time we can have another discussion with Indonesian students with the same or different groups. So once again, thank you very much, Mr. Basil Fernando, and also all students who stay tuned, who join the discussion until finish. And we will publish this discussion. Then you guys, student, can share the link to the group of your internal group. So the student who do not join with our discussion can listen and watch the link of our discussion today. Okay. Once again, thank you very much, Mr. Basil.
Thank you very much.
And yes, hope we can have another occasion with the Indonesian students
able to talk to you again.
International Law and Human Rights.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Terima kasih. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Basil. Bye bye. Terima kasih semuanya ya. So see you next week. Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye.
Mr. Basil, stay safe.
Okay.